I'd like to share with you the story of my childhood and life journey. It's my hope that there's something in my story will encourage you in your story. Though I hope none of you will be able to directly relate to my story, I know statistically many of you will. I hope my story will encourage each of you that life's greatest tragedies can often give you great gifts and help you to become people of great depth and character, and that the very pain in your life, if dealt with properly, can be used to help others. Your pain can be your power. You see, it's not where you start that matters. It's where you end up that counts. I was born in 1954 in New York City to a brilliant, sophisticated, college-educated woman who was also an unwed mother and an alcoholic. My mother loved me very much. But her addiction to alcohol would bring uncertainty and insanity to every area of my life. My mother was an advertising writer in New York City in the 50s and 60s. And when she got paid, we'd live extravagantly, going to plays, museums, fine restaurants, and the symphony until the money ran out. And then there was literally no food in the house. I would beg my mother for food, which would make her break down in tears. And in order for me to eat, I would find food left on the ground, or leftovers on tables at outside restaurants, or steal food from the local grocery store. In fact, if it wasn't for a subsidized school lunch program, I might have starved. Now, my earliest childhood memory wasn't about carousels, playing on swings, going to the zoo or to the circus, but of being beaten, locked in a closet while my mother would go out drinking. Because of the absolute insanity and constant uncertainty of my life, I became a discipline problem from nursery school on up. And when I did act out, my mother would call Joe, who was a married man who was having a long-standing affair with her and was most likely my father. And he would meet me after school, walk me to my apartment, and beat me senseless with a razor strap. At 10 years old, my mother didn't think I was getting enough male attention. And so she paid one of the coaches at the local boys' club to spend time with me. What she didn't know, however, was that he was a pedophile who ritually molested and raped me over a period of many months. And because there was no one there to protect me, I was molested by 3 other men over the next 4 years. All of these events would cause me to act out more in school, which would in turn cause me to get more beatings. In fact, my behavior was so bad that I was expelled from the New York City school system in 5th grade. I can remember going out onto the balcony of my 10-story apartment, which happened to face the Empire State Building. And I would throw my legs over the top rail and sit there looking down with my legs dangling, wondering if I just let go, would it make all the pain go away? When I was 12 years old, my mother made a decision to move to Jacksonville, Florida, with the promise of a new job and a chance for a fresh start. But the job never materialized, and by this time my mother's alcoholism was to the point where she was barely functional. And so I began supporting the family, throwing 500 newspapers every morning from 2:30 a.m. until it was time to go to school. On Fridays, my mother would hand me the collection book and tell me that I needed to collect between $150 and $200 at $3.65 per customer, or we wouldn't eat that week or be able to pay the rent. So by age 16, I had been beaten, starved, locked in closets, physically and sexually abused, expelled from nursery school in 5th grade, and been supporting the family for nearly 4 years. I went to school sleep deprived, barely maintaining a passing grade, as well as my sanity. Now, fortunately for me, I experienced a religious conversion, and so I relied on my faith in God for a miracle. I knew I needed help, and I needed it all right then. I began my last year of high school living alone in my own apartment, totally supporting myself because my mother had been sent away to a rehabilitation center after being thrown in jail for writing bad checks in order to eat and buy alcohol. But my mother would later move in with me later on that year, clean and sober for the very first time in my life, and she remained that way for the rest of her life. My life started getting better. That same year, I met my wife-to-be, who sang like an angel and was the answer to the deepest yearning in my heart. We fell in love, and we were married at 19 and recorded our first of 4 albums at that time and began singing and touring the country, singing in various churches throughout the United States. Things were going so well for me in my life that in 1980, we started our family, having my first of 3 beautiful daughters. I had gotten my miracle. Now, unfortunately, just as things in my life appeared to be on the upswing, the lingering trauma of my childhood began to take its toll. I experienced periods of dark depression, anxiety, and flashbacks as a result of my world being so chaotic and unpredictable as a child. I've always had a saying, you can either deal with it or it will deal with you. Well, I had never really dealt with all of the trauma in my life, and as a result, it was about to deal with me. My life was slowly devolving into a darkness that was impossible to escape. And in 1988, our 14-year marriage dissolved as a result of my depression, and my wife gained sole custody of my children because I was, in quote, mentally ill. But the thought of me not directly fathering my children was absolutely not an option, as I knew what it was like to grow up without the protection of a father. But in 24 hours, I went from living in a beautiful home in the middle of 7 acres on the side of a mountain to living in a tenement apartment. I was devastated to the point where I had to be hospitalized, where I was diagnosed with severe chronic clinical depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. The trauma of my childhood collided with the devastation of my divorce, and I was rendered hopeless, suicidal, and in deep despair. The only thought that kept me alive was the thought that I couldn't leave my children without a father.